stood out to you, and you may go, oh yeah, I remember those things, or oh yes, I'm practicing those things, right? But I'm guessing if you're like me, even a little bit, there's a lot of things that you're like, those were really good 2.5 years ago, and I'm not doing them like I was then, or I'm not doing them at all now. Things, maybe we've changed how we do things. Hopefully it's changed the way you do things in your marriage overall. That's the goal. So the goal for going through this again is if I'm just to be honest with you, it helped our marriage. Like Lisa and I, she's not here today, so I can say whatever I want. But Lisa's not here today, she's not feeling well. But she told me to say, it changed our marriage, for the better. It helped us immensely, just practically and our approach, right? And we've been married 20 years now, and I'll tell you if I look at, okay, on the way here, Carter, so Lisa isn't here, so Carter sat in the front seat, and I don't even know why, but we started talking about college. We started talking about what you're going to do with your life. He's 17. We're going to college days here in a couple weeks, and we're actually going with him. And so maybe it's on my mind too. And I was asking him, what do you want to do? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, that's okay, right? That's okay. And so we started talking through those things. And then I started thinking about what I was in college and how I met Lisa at college and how we got married at the beginning of our relationship and our marriage. And how, honestly, those first 5 years of our marriage before the kids came along, we were stupid. We were selfish in our marriage. We were selfish husband and a selfish wife. Numerous times. I'm not throwing her under the bus, she would say the same thing. We were selfish. We were not good spouses to each other. Not that we had a bad marriage, right? It's not like we were yelling and everyone in the apartment complex was, oh, the Vistas are at it again. It wasn't like that. But we were immature, inexperienced, and our marriage has, by what God has given us and by God's grace, has come a long way. Not to say we've got it figured out, because we don't. Not at all. We still have times that we all have, right, where we struggle in our marriage, or we struggle in our relationship, where it's not as honoring to God as it should be, right? But to see the jumps that we have made in our relationship, I will tell you, when we went through, personally, we read through this book and kind of studied it out on our own before we taught it, it changed. It was probably the biggest jump in our marriage in one time ever was, as far as how it got better and how we listened to each other and how things are just better. So I encourage you to, as we go through this lesson series again, to focus on your marriage. And then going back to Carter, telling him, whether you figure out what you want to do before you go to college, it doesn't matter. Whether you even figure out what you want to do with your life while in college, not necessarily important. All that is important is that you decide you will do what God wants you to do, no matter what it is. If it's to be a Brother Samuel, or to be a Pastor Jed, or to be just a guy that goes to church with his family, whatever it is that God wants you to do it. Right? And it doesn't matter when you figure that out. But I emphasized, and I've said it in here too, my suggestion to him is to go to a Bible college, right? Because your spouse, you're probably going to find there. The chances of you finding a spouse in your early 20s is higher. Not always, doesn't always happen that way. But your spouse is the most important thing to determine who you are as a person. Right? So the two of you, as husband and wife now, you have determined who you are and who you will become, even still, regardless of how long you've been married. You are the greatest influence on who your spouse is going to be, or the potential for who they can be, or who they won't be, based on who you marry. And so having that conversation, and I think my mind was on this obviously too, but having that conversation with him, and I know Madison was listening in the back, and she's got a few years to worry about that too, like 20, at least. But understanding that your relationship with your spouse is the most important relationship with any other human being on this planet. And as a Christian, that makes it even more important, because our marriage reflects Christ's love for us, reflect what he's done for us. And our marriage should be an example of our belief, of our faith, based on how our relationship is. And that doesn't mean it's perfect, because we're not perfect, but we should strive to be honoring God in the relationship we have with each other. And so anytime we can glean from the scriptures ways to be better husbands, ways to be better wives, I think we'd be foolish to shove it off, or to brush it aside, or to lower the importance of what it is. None of us have got the perfect marriages. We all have room to grow, and that's the goal. Do you want a stronger marriage than you have right now? And your answer should be yes. It should be. You should want a stronger marriage. And that's the goal of this whole lesson series of love and respect. So Take your Bibles, go to Ephesians chapter 5. So there's the introduction and kind of where my brain is when it comes to going through this lesson series. Having a stronger marriage. You want more joy? You want more peace? More fulfillment? Right? None of us likes when there's no peace in our relationship. And that happens, right? When we have disagreements or heated discussions, whatever you want to call them. There's a lack of peace. There's unease. There's tension. None of us likes that. No one wants to go through that. And if we can be better husbands and better wives, we can reduce the amount of times that those happen. So Ephesians chapter 5, I want to go down to verse number 21. I wanted to kind of read the whole chapter, but we'll just drop down to the part that's kind of important for us right now. But verse 21, the Bible says, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. And as we read, don't just go through it, like pay attention to what's being said. We're not going to go through every verse here. Excuse me, we're going to focus on verse 33. But all of this is vital, right? It's all vital. And we'll come back to it other weeks. But verse number 22, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives, as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. So that whole passage of scripture of how men are to love their wives like Christ loved the church, right? We focus on that a lot. Sermons are focused on that a lot. And marriage books, Christian marriage books are focused on that a lot. And it's essential and it's a high bar, right, men, to hit. To love your wife like Christ loved us, it's a high bar. And we can't attain it on our own. We need Christ's help with it. But understanding that it's to love, and also at the end of verse 33, the reverence or the respect that the husband is supposed to receive from the wife as well. It's a like it has here. It's a circle, and it works together when it feeds off each other. One feeds off the other. When one is given what that part needs, it's easier to give what the other part needs, and that's where we're going to go. So we're changing up a little bit. You like crafts, arts and crafts? Yeah. Okay, I feel like it's a little silly, but it's okay because it's me, and that's just, you expect it. So you don't have to bring this back every week, but I want you to use this. So I've got love and respect. It's the best. I tried to find like a weight, a barbell. It's hard to find paper cutouts of a barbell. So, bearded men, and if you don't have a beard, it's okay. It doesn't mean anything. I'm just trying to exemplify love, respect, right? Love, respect. So, wives, you're going to get a heart. Husbands, you're going to get a bearded man. Okay, so I think I have enough. So, Keith, just take one. I'm going to give you. Just take one and pass them around to the men. And Corey, do you mind helping me? Give one to your wife and pass the rest around to the wives. So the purpose for these, and I won't give you all my thoughts because it's hard to listen when you're anticipating cool things coming your way. Do I have enough beards? I hope so. Just like literally?
Yep.
Beautiful. Okay.
Right?
Everybody got one? Okay.
Jeremy
Perfect.
has two.
He's the extra man.
I'm twice the man I used to be.
That's right. It's true.
After so many kids, you qualify.
You get two beards. A beard within a beard. Beardception.
You're a man's man.
So my thought was, I told Lisa this, and she's like, yeah, maybe not that far. But I was like, so, she's a good judge on that. But I was like, we need to bring these to class every week. Just keep them in your Bible, but you don't have to do that. What I would like, I'll take those, Corey. Thank you. What I would like you to do, so this is silly, but I want you to use them. Like, okay, and we'll get through the love and respect part of it all. But, if you're not feeling the love you need, wives, instead of shoving it, and this isn't like a, right, that's not the purpose. It's not a weapon. Paper cuts or not, this is not a weapon. It's not to be designed as a weapon, but a reminder. Because again, and we'll get into next week, communication is key. Yes, sir?
You really need to be videoing your classes.
That's true. If you're listening, you're not going to know then what's going on. But, I'm sorry. Ask somebody that was here. So, it's not to be made as a weapon to hold over your husband's head. And nor is it to be made as a weapon to hold over your wife's head, right? It's a communication help, right? It's a way to help you communicate. Because let's be honest, and this was one of the things we struggled with too in our marriage, was saying the things out loud that are in here that need to be said sometimes is hard. And sometimes hearing the things that need to be said can be difficult. Right, we get offended at the things that are being said, not realizing the cry of need that is there. And again, we'll get to that in the future, and interpreting what is being said and understanding and hearing what's being said, maybe not the exact words, but what the heart is in that matter. So my plan with these is for you to, I want you to use them. I want you to have them. I want you to incorporate this into your marriage on a weekly basis, on a day-to-day basis, because marriage it'd be so easy if it wasn't so day-to-day. Right? Marriage would just be easy if it wasn't a day-to-day, never-ending, ongoing thing you have to work at. Right? Because if you put it into coast, you're not working at it. You're coasting, and it's not going to grow. It's going to deteriorate. So if it wasn't for the fact that you had to constantly work at it, marriage would be fine. It'd be easy. So this is, and again, it's fun, it's silly, but it could be a tool to help you open those conversations and honestly say what's going on. But it represents the love and respect part of it. And so it's really, to a better marriage, it's a simple secret. It's a simple thing to implement into your marriage to have a better marriage. Wives, submit. Husbands, love. It's simple. Like it's plain as day, black and white. God tells us exactly how to have the marriage we're supposed to have. So it's simple, but it's difficult at the same time. Right? Husbands, you're to love, and that's agape love. Right? The love that's unconditional. There are no conditions on the love that you're supposed to give your wife. There are no stipulations. There's not, I feel like it, I don't feel like it. There's no, I'm having a good day, I'm having a bad day. You're having a good day, you're having a bad day. It's an unconditional love, just like Christ has for us. If Christ loved us like we loved our wives, woof. Right? We would never expect Christ to love us that way. He loves us perfectly. But that's what God says we're supposed to do. Love our wives that way. Agape, unconditional. Love her as you love you. We love ourselves. Even those of us that are the most humble, most self-deprecating human beings still love ourselves because we still eat, we still take care of ourselves, we still do things for ourselves. And God knows that's how men are. Men like our things, and when we find something we like it, and we go all in on it. Right? Our wives should be that thing above everything else that we go all in on. That's how we're supposed to love them. And wives, we're supposed to reverence, and the word there is I sounded it out, and I wrote out this pronunciation, phobio, I don't think that's right. But it's to be in awe. To be in awe of. That's what the word reverence there means. It means to be in awe of. To respect, to revere. That's the word God uses there when it says that she reverence her husband. It's to be in awe of or to revere. And simple. That's what God says. You do these things, you have a good marriage. Your marriage is better than it was before. Simple, but they're not necessarily easy. But God knows how marriage works. Right? Like we would all agree that God probably is an expert on marriage. He instituted it. Right? He's the one that came up with the whole idea, knew how it works, gives us a lot of instruction how to do it. The problem is we don't always follow the directions. or we follow it partially and not all the way, or we're not wholehearted into it. And so we wonder sometimes why we go through times where our marriage is on the rocks, right? And statistically, marriages, if people even get married anymore, half marriages end in divorce. And then that falls into Christians, which we would fall into, and there's a lot of other things that fall into Christian that may not be considered what I would consider Christian. But basically just 50% of people that get married get divorced. And even the new definition of marriage, boys and boys getting married, half of them are getting divorced. Girls and girls get married, half of them are getting divorced. It applies across the spectrum. And we're going to throw all that out because that's not biblical, right? But if you just wanted to be like, well, marriage, they think it's fine, and then they figured it all out. Marriage, it's hard, right? And 50% of Christians are getting divorced as well. So the thing we focus on a lot here is the love and respect and giving what is needed by your spouse to honestly receive what you need as a spouse. So these are commands given to both parties of the marriage to give to the opposite party that which is most needed, right, in their part of the relationship. So how do we know how do we know wives need love the most? And I say primary, not exclusively, but primarily. How do we know that wives need love? And how do we know that men need reverence or respect? How do we know that that's the primary need, right? And obviously God gives us this in his word, but it's even practical. A wife thinks, and I mean, sorry, Lisa, but she asked me this even this morning, and she's sick, she's not feeling well. But a wife thinks, and then audibly will say, does my husband love me as much as I love him? Right? A wife will think that. I've never been a wife, but I have one. And wives tend to think, I love my husband so much. Does he love me as much as I love him? And she'll not even ask audibly. And if you're a wife that's never asked this, I'll be surprised. Do you love me? You ever ask your husband, do you love me? Do you really love me? Like, do you love me? She knows, right? The wife probably knows he loves her. She knows that that's a fact. But she wonders at times if he feels the love nearly as much as she does. Right? If he loves me nearly as much as I do, because God made men and women differently, emotionally, chemically, all those things, hormonally. So women approach love and marriage different than men do. And so a wife might think, does he love me as much as I love him? And she'll think that internally. And then if she's not being treated in a way that is loving, she thinks she sees proof that he does not love her, at least as much as she loves him. And that causes feelings of not being valued, insecurity, right, in the relationship, and then insecurity in the individual herself. And it'll cause a roller coaster of emotions. And if she is not assured of the love from her husband. And she'll think, well, he needs to be more loving to me. He needs to be more loving. And so I need to encourage him and help him be more loving. And so usually the way, not always, so don't kill me, don't throw anything, okay? But usually the way that wives will encourage their husbands to love is say, why aren't you more loving to me? You need to be more loving. Why aren't you loving like she is to her husband? And when a husband hears that, it doesn't cause like birds to sing and rainbows to sprout and say, my love has just grown infinitely like the Grinch's heart for you right now. Right? He doesn't feel those emotions because he feels like, well, she's nagging me. She doesn't respect me. She doesn't think I love you. You don't think I love you? Let me list the ways that I love you. Right? And now we're on what the book calls the crazy cycle. Right? And I'll take a pause here. The book, the Love and Respect book, Emerson is the guy that wrote it. He uses NIV in the book, right, in which I don't ascribe to. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he says word for word, but generally, overall, it's very practical and very helpful. So I would encourage you to read the book. I would. It's super helpful to your marriage, but understand that he's not necessarily on the same level that we would be here all the time. Okay, just disclaimer out there for that. So that's a crazy cycle. And again, the wife needs that love. She needs love. God tells us that she needs love. That doesn't mean she doesn't need respect. Right? Obviously, respect is essential for a relationship. You have to respect each other. If you just love and there's no respect there, we're missing the point. The wife needs respect. The husband needs love. It's not to say the husband doesn't need to feel loved. He does. right? But the primary need for each individual in the relationship, the wife essentially primarily needs love, the husband primarily needs respect, which is why God tells the husband to love his wife and the wife to reverence her husband, because that's what they need. So a husband, this is how we know the wife, that's possibly what she thinks and what she might even say. The husband, however, usually knows again that their wife loves them, and they're not really concerned about that. There's no question, not concerned, there's no question, there's no doubt. Most husbands in their relationship, a good, decent relationship, knows that their wife loves them, right? They don't really question that. In their heart, in their mind, they know, my wife loves me. But if you were to ask a husband on some days, she loves you, but does she like you? The answer might be, well, I don't know. Maybe not. Right? Because he knows she loves him, but maybe the dislike or even contempt sometimes is felt by the husband. Doesn't mean he's like, well, she doesn't love me. She hates everything about me. She doesn't respect me, so she doesn't love me. No, I think she still loves me, but she just doesn't like how I do things. She doesn't like me necessarily. She loves me because we're married, and I believe she's committed to that. But what he's really saying is the respect isn't there. He's not getting the respect that he needs, and it comes off to him as dislike, annoyance, right? Dismissal. I could do it better. Let me just handle it. Those types of things that a man he'll live with and he'll adjust to, right, in the marriage, and he'll adjust the way he does things. He may even stop trying to do things, but he'll adjust. But he doesn't question if she loves him, but she may wonder if she likes him at times, and that's to be interpreted as the respect that he needs. So we know that God has plans and guidelines for how a marriage is supposed to work best. Again, he instituted the relationship. He knows what works. And just we could take that whole chapter, we could take the whole part that we read. Taking verse 33 alone is enough to say what the husband is supposed to do and what the wife is supposed to do. And it is not and cannot be, I will obey the command to love her once she starts giving me the respect that I deserve. Right? Once she starts treating me right, then I'm going to love her. Because it'll be easier for me to do that because she's treating me right. Then I will love her the way she needs to be loved. You cannot do that. It cannot work that way. It does not work that way. Nor can it be, I will give him the respect once he earns it. Because spoiler alert, he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't earn it. We don't deserve any of that. We're human. We're imperfect. We're going to make mistakes. And the Bible does not say, so love your wife even as himself as soon as she starts respecting you. Nor does it say, see the wife reverence her husband once he earns it and starts to deserve it. Right? So as a Christian, you cannot say, I will respect once he starts loving me the way I need to be loved. Or I will start respecting him once he starts acting like a man and deserves it. Right? Because that's not what God says. So even if your wife is the most disrespectful shrew of a woman, you are still to unconditionally love her like Christ loved you and like you love yourself. No matter how disrespectful your wife is, and I'm guessing all the wives and the wives that I know in here, none of them are the most disrespectful shrew of women, unless you're a really good faker when you're around other people. But I bet there are times when you can be pretty disrespectful because you're human. I'm guessing there are times that you can be just downright mean to your husband, and specifically. And isn't it funny how we can treat acquaintances and friends better than we treat our spouses? Because we get comfortable with each other. We're complacent. We know each other better. And we don't have the filter when we deal with each other sometimes. And when things aren't feeling great, when you aren't feeling loved like you should be loved, when you're downright feeling unloved as a wife, it's super easy to be disrespectful. It's natural to be disrespectful and mean and rude because you're crying out for something you need and you don't necessarily maybe know how to get it or how to say you need it, and so it comes out in a sharp tongue. Disrespect. And that's how it comes across. And the goal of this series is to help us not do that, but to convey what is needed with a heart on a stick instead of a disrespectful tone or disrespectful word. And husbands or wives, even if you're Neanderthal of a man, is the most unsensitive, uncaring, unloving, thick-headed human being alive, you're still to reverence and respect him like you would Jesus. Right? You're supposed to submit yourselves as unto the Lord. God says, don't do it because he deserves it. Don't do it because he's the best or he's the man. You love him so much you just respect him. Do it like you're doing it to me, is what Jesus says. And so even when he is just downright ignorant of your need of love, he is maybe even just like mean. Husbands can get tired and angry and lose their temper and say unloving things, say uncaring things, or just dismiss and ignore the fact that you need what you need in love and just be unloving and not even know, which is maybe to a wife even worse. He's unloving, he doesn't even get it. He doesn't even see it. He doesn't even know that he's doing it. And if you approach him on it, he's clueless to the fact that he's unloving. Even if that is your day-to-day, which I'm guessing that is not necessarily the case of the men I know, and here again, unless you are the best actor in the entire world, you love your wife. But you probably have times where you're not very good at loving her. There are times where you miss it. There are times where you mess up. There are times where you're straight up unloving, maybe even mean about your love that you're supposed to love her like Christ loves us. There's probably times that happens. And wives, when that happens, you're still supposed to respect him. You're supposed to respond with respect instead of the disrespect that comes when you feel unloved. And husbands, when you feel disrespected, the unloving that comes just naturally that you want to do, you're still supposed to be loving, like Christ loves us. And the whole part of it is unconditional. No matter what the other spouse does or doesn't do, you should do what God tells you to do. So regardless if your wife respects you, you should love. Regardless if your husband loves you, you should respect, because that is what God says you're supposed to do. It can be difficult to show love and respect when you're not getting what you need to get, what you primarily need. When a husband feels disrespected, it's really hard to show love. Right? If you're just disrespected, if you come in from work and your wife asks you if you did something, you didn't get to it because whatever, and she's like, "Oh, again?" You never get anything done that you start. Your response should be, "I love you so much. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. You're the best thing since sliced bread. I love you with all of my heart." And when your wife says those things to you, those are not the things you want to say. You want to, again, get out the list. You want to talk about the things I didn't do? Let me talk about things I did do. The food you're making right now, because of me. The house, the roof, that's mine too. You don't want that no more? I'll stop paying that and you can go somewhere else. Right? Unloving, disrespectful, that's this thing. That's the crazy cycle. So when you're disrespected, it's really hard to express love, but you're supposed to. And wives, when your husband is unloving, when he comes home and he throws his dirty clothes in the corner, doesn't hang it up in the closet like you've asked him to, when he kicks his shoes off and mud goes everywhere in the kitchen that you just swept 10 minutes ago, where he grabs the food and goes sits in the couch instead of at the table, right, where you have ready to sit with him and talk about your days together because you wanted to see what happened with him and you want to tell him what's going on with you, and he seems not interested. He wants to see what happened on the news. And he walks right past the kids. He doesn't give any time. He pets the dog. He sits down, and he's in his zone, in his world. And you're like, look at all the things I did for you. I'm showing love to you, and you're not loving me one bit. And you want to go over there and just start letting him know how you're feeling because of what he did. You're supposed to still give him respect. But that's hard. Almost impossible. On your own, it is impossible. But if you're following what God says we're supposed to do, you will still respect him. And herein lies the ease of getting onto the crazy cycle. Because those are day-to-day things that happen to us. Maybe not that extreme, but some version of that has happened to all of us at some point or another. And, there may be weeks that it happens all the time. You might go a long time where that doesn't happen. But it's super easy to just jump on that crazy cycle. And that whole crazy cycle is that without love, right, when the wife doesn't get the love that she needs, naturally she reacts with a way of disrespect. And when the husband feels disrespected, he naturally reacts without love. And you keep going in that circle. You're on, it's like a merry-go-round, it's a washing machine, it's a dryer, whatever spins uncontrollably. You can get on that in your marriage. And it feeds itself. And until somebody breaks that cycle, until someone steps off or attempts to slow it down, it's just going to keep going. You're going to react without love, right? And then you're going to react without respect. It's going to feel disrespectful to the husband. He's going to act unloving. She's going to feel unloved, and she's going to act disrespectful. He's going to feel disrespected, and he's going to act unloving. And it's just going to spin and spin and spin. And you're going to fight, and you're going to argue, and it's going to be tense. And you're going to snip at each other, and there's no peace. There's no happiness. There's no joy. There's no fulfillment. And you come to church, and you pretend like everything's fine, but you don't really talk to each other because if you could sit somewhere else, you would. But you can't because you have to pretend like everything's fine. And meanwhile, that cycle is just spinning and spinning. And you're going, hopefully right now, you're willing to admit to yourself, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm there right now. I can see where I was before. I can see how I could get there real easily today, tomorrow. And that's the goal, is to admit it. Is to admit that, yeah, it's easy to get on, and I'm on it now. You need to be willing to be honest with yourself in your relationship. If you want it to change. If you're content with the crazy cycle, then by all means continue to do what you're doing. It seems crazy, seems like a waste of time, seems like a bad example for children, seems just like a lot of not good, and it's disobedient. I'm going to throw that in there to God. It's disobedient. That's kind of important too. But it can get to a point where on that crazy cycle, it's about proving your point. It's about winning. And we've all been there too, where you've got to win that argument. You got to prove your point. You got to prove how you're correct and they're wrong. He doesn't show me love in the way I need it, and I must show him his fault here. Right? That could be the thought process. I've got to get over this hump. He's got to understand. So I'm going to stick to my guns. He needs to know I'm not being loved the way I need to be. And you may not even understand it in those terms, but that's what's happening. And men, you might say, she needs to get off my case, give me a break. Can't she see all the things I already do to show her love? Right? And that could be, and I'm just fine. I'm going to prove to you, get off my case. These are all the ways that I love you. Get over it. And you just spin and spin. And it's I'm not going to start loving you until you understand all the things I already do. And I'm not going to start respecting you until you understand all the things that I need from you that I already do. And round you go. And it will never stop. So how do we get off the crazy cycle of doom? Because that's what it is. It'll doom your marriage. That type of relationship will doom it. So can we get off of this, please? Can we step off of this crazy cycle? Can someone get off the merry-go-round and stop it from spinning? How do we do that? How do we get that done? And I'm ending here. This is the end, but it's really the beginning. There are two quick things, two tiny small little things that you can do to help get off the crazy cycle. Number one, you must each make one life-changing decision. Life-changing decision. Husband, you need to choose to believe that your wife does not intend to be disrespectful. Like with your life, with your relationship, you need to choose to believe, which you have to make the decision in every case, in every scenario, in every conversation, that your wife does not intend to be disrespectful. And wives, you need to choose to believe, make a choice, and honestly believe it, that your husband does not intend to be unloving. And if you can do that, if you can make that decision for yourself about your spouse, it will change your marriage. It didn't say it was easy. It is tiny, but it's not simple. Basically, you're saying, in other words, give grace in your relationship. Be forgiving. Be long-suffering with your spouse, not short. Long-suffering. Give grace. In other words, assume the best from him. Assume the best from her, even when it's not the best. Even when it's obvious they're not loving you like you need to be. Even when it's obvious they're not respecting you the way you need to be. Assume that is not their heart. Assume that give grace. Understand maybe there was a bad day. Maybe it was a bad moment. Maybe you said something you shouldn't have said. But give whatever you need to do in your mind. Believe that they do not have ill intent towards you in your relationship. And if we ask, we'd be like, of course I don't think my wife or my husband thinks that about me. But you need to choose to believe that about yourself or yourself about them too. You would never, probably, unless your marriage is in really tough times, tell your Sunday school teacher or pastor, he doesn't love me, he hates me, or she doesn't respect me. And if we're there and that's what we really believe, then you need to sit with somebody. But if you're struggling at times, which we all do, choose to believe they have the best intentions for you. And then secondly, the second thing you must do to get off the crazy cycle, and this is where we're going to start focusing next week, communication. And all the men groan. We have to talk about feelings. We have to understand how each other are feeling about things. And the wives are like, yay, we get to talk. I've been dying to have talk, just sit and just talk and just pour our hearts out to each other. Okay? And we're going to talk about that, but it's not just about communicating, it's about interpreting what the other person is saying and where they're coming from. And again, giving that grace and choosing to believe the best case scenario from each other. And so it comes with talking, for sure, but also comes with interpreting what's being said and what you're saying to each other. And this is probably the biggest factor for Lisa and my marriage with the last couple years is the communication aspect of it. Understanding how to say, I feel disrespected without being unloving. Learning how to say, I don't feel loved without being disrespectful. There are ways to do that. And this could be a beginning of how to do it without saying it. But there are ways, I can't tell you how many times since we went through this last time, that we have just said, in a situation that was tense and didn't go well, where I say, I feel disrespected about what you just said. And because of what we've studied and learned, the conversation, the argument stops, and we talk about it. And we're both willing to say, okay, where she said, I feel unloved right now. And that wasn't my intent, but she's telling me, and I can say, okay, I can see how what I did would come across that way. And it brings everything down. The pressure releases, and you talk about it. It's not fun, but it's way better than screaming and yelling about being mad, slamming doors, accusing, jumping on the crazy cycle. We're starting to spin it up, right, when we're talking, and then someone says, hold on, I'm not feeling so good about what just happened, and it puts a foot down into the dirt and slows it down. And hopefully, if it goes well, we both get off. And that's the goal. So, all right, we'll stop there.